Good morning. My name is Kate Dudley-Logue, Vice President of Community Outreach with the Ontario Autism Coalition. I am joined today by MPP Chandra Pasma, the Ontario NDP's education critic, as well as MPP Alexa Gilmore, and two parents, Shantel Bizio and Shannon McNally. The OAC is in its second year of collecting data from families whose children are navigating the special education system in Ontario. Families from 64 school boards across the province completed our survey, sharing their child's experiences navigating the special education system during the 24-25 school year. The findings show a system that is failing disabled students and placing unsustainable pressure on families, educators, school boards, and communities. I'd like to dive into some of our key findings and then introduce parents who can share their personal stories and struggles with navigating special education in Ontario. Firstly, it's important to highlight that there is no greater indication of just how strained the resources in our schools are than the fact that students with disabilities are being told that they simply cannot attend school. Sometimes for part of the day, or from certain activities like recess or field trips, and sometimes they are being told that they are not able to attend at all. And the number one reason given is always that schools simply cannot support them safely due to the lack of resources. Our data showed that 26% of disabled students were placed on a modified schedule at some point in the school year, meaning that they were not attending a full school day, and sometimes they were only allowed to attend for 1 or 2 hours. With over 362,000 students with special education needs in our Ontario schools, 26% represents over 94,000 students in Ontario that are not attending school for parts of their day. The other important factor to note here is that last year, our collected data showed that just 19% of students with special education needs were on modified schedules. This is a striking increase and shows that schools are being forced more and more to rely on this strategy as a tool to manage the dwindling supports that they have available to them. 33% of students are experiencing some form of exclusion. This represents approximately 119,000 students with complex needs that are being told that they must be picked up from school or miss part of the school experience. And a staggering 6% of disabled students are not in school at all. They are either being fully excluded due to the lack of resources, or their families have given up trying to navigate the constant calls to pick up their child and the stress involved with managing all of it. This 6% adds up to 21,000 students in Ontario who are not attending school at all. It's offensive that Minister Calandra is putting such an incredible emphasis on attendance in his new legislation in Bill 101. While students with disabilities are quite literally being told that they cannot attend school even though they want to. This is a human rights violation, and this government is refusing to acknowledge it. Other key findings in our report: 42% of families said that their child's IEPs were being followed inconsistently or not at all. 66% of families whose children require special education supports worry about their child's safety when they're at school. 74% of families surveyed reported at least one safety issue that they were concerned with, the biggest concerns being bullying, elopement, and violence. 38% of families say their child lacked the appropriate placement to meet their support needs. This problem is going to continue to intensify as the few school boards that continue to offer special education placements are increasingly cutting them, and we're already seeing that happen for next school year. 60% of disabled students are not accessing curriculum consistently, and 26% of families say that they feel their children are not accessing curriculum at all. To put it bluntly, the system is collapsing, and we all know why. It is not due to educators who are burning themselves out trying to do the best they can with so very little. It is not due to trustees, as much as the minister wants to vilify them. They are more often than not the ones trying to protect special education supports. Chronic underfunding of special education and the lack of commitment or will from this government to ensure that students with disabilities are safe and accessing a meaningful education is the issue, and it must be addressed. I'd like to now introduce Shantel. She is the mother to an autistic daughter named Amelia, who eloped from school property just last week.
On April 20th, I did what so many parents do without a second thought. I got my kids ready and I drove them to school. I trusted that when I dropped my daughter off, she'd be safe until 2:30. By 11:30, we were told Amelia was missing and that the police had already been called. When the officer came to my door, I remember standing there trying to process what I was hearing, but nothing prepares you for those words. Your child is missing. The school told us Amelia had gone out for recess and never returned to class. They searched the building, and after a 10-minute lockdown, the school contacted the police. That's how quickly an ordinary day turned into the worst moment of my life. As a parent, your mind doesn't go to calm or rational places. It goes straight to fear and panic. The police officer asked me what felt like endless questions about my daughter. I was then asked to file a missing person report for my 9-year-old. As the minutes passed, the situation grew. Police cars, drones, and a helicopter were searching. After 2 of the longest hours of my life, Amelia was found, close to home and thankfully by a neighbor. The relief I felt in that moment is something I can't fully put into words, but relief does not erase what happened, because the truth is this should have never happened in the first place. My daughter has autism, ADHD, and anxiety. She is bright and incredibly good at masking her needs. Her anxiety is often overwhelming, and she tries to run away from it instead of seeking support at school. Her doctor has stated she requires an EA. Instead, she shares support if and when someone is available. This is not a system designed for safety. That is a system stretched beyond its limits. I want to make it clear. I do not blame the school for this incident. They're doing the best they can with what little resources they have. This is not just a safety issue. It is a system-wide failure. Teachers are doing everything they can with what they've been given. There are not enough EAs or support staff, not enough resources for children with complex needs. We need proactive safety measures. We need proper staffing levels so children are supervised and supported. And we need meaningful investment in special education so that the support is consistent. Since sharing our story, I've heard from so many other parents whose children have eloped from school, whose children are not receiving the support that they've been approved for, parents who have been forced to pull their children out of school entirely because no longer feel it's safe. This is not rare or isolated. This is happening across our communities. Families like mine are also struggling to access support outside the classroom. The Ontario Autism Program is supposed to provide children with autism the services and funding they need to be safe, to communicate, and to succeed. But families are waiting for up to 5 years before receiving help. I am here today to advocate not just for my daughter, but for every child who has been overlooked and for every parent who is carrying this fear. We need change now.
Thank you, Shantel. I also want to note, Shantel is the 4th parent that I've brought here in the span of 2 years whose child has eloped from school. And it hasn't just been 4 cases. We could probably be here every day sharing these stories. They're happening in our schools every day. And this government knows about it. We keep bringing these stories here and nothing is being done. We've heard every single time that an investigation will happen and nothing seems to ever come of those investigations, which is frustrating. Next, I'd like to bring up Shannon McNally, mom to Owen. She'll be sharing her experience with exclusions.
Good morning. My name is Shannon, and I'm here as a parent. In February, we received an email telling us that our 7-year-old child, Owen, would be reduced to a 2-hour school day. He attends the OCDSB in Ottawa. They did not have the supports to keep him there safely for a full day. Owen does not require a 5-on-1. He requires a 1-on-1. What followed was not a plan. It was a maze of red tape, delays, barriers, just to access something as basic as a specialized, smaller classroom placement. We were told he needed more support, but to get that support, we had to prove it. repeatedly. We were told to pursue a private psychoeducational assessment for several $1,000s. So we did. Every step forward required relentless advocacy, meetings that led to more meetings, decisions that stalled, and timelines that kept shifting. Meanwhile, our child remained on reduced hours. 2 hours a day is not an education. Owen's hours slowly increased, but he never returned to a full school day. And as for our family, it meant months of instability. For example, quitting my job, hiring respite, sleepless nights, worry, and a child becoming more and more aware that he didn't belong at school with his peers. It took nearly 3 months of constant pressure to secure a specialized classroom placement, pushing a system to respond, and advocating for something that should have been there from the start. It began with a delegation I gave at our local school board level meeting. We went through an IPRC appeal process with a fierce autism doctor, and we had a campaign created for Owen by the Ontario Autism Coalition. Fast forward to where I spoke at Queen's Park Education Rally and made the 6 p.m. news. I also did an interview on CBC Ontario today. And here's what's most concerning. Once you step into the process, you realize how many other families are facing exclusions too. Families who don't have the time, the knowledge, or the capacity to fight this hard. Families whose children are still waiting. This is not just about Owen. He is not a one-off, rather an example across the province. At the same time, we are still waiting to access therapy through the Ontario Autism Program, and that delay matters, because when kids don't get the right support early, their needs can escalate, making school harder to attend and specialized classroom placements even more difficult to secure. The barriers compound. It's about a system where access depends on how hard you can push, where parents are forced to become case managers and navigators just to get their children the right support. This is not sustainable, and it's definitely not equitable. Our children deserve better than red tape. They deserve timely, appropriate support without having to fight for it every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. We'll now get Chandra to come up with some comments.
Good morning. I want to thank the Ontario Autism Coalition for this very important research. It's research that the government should be doing, collecting and tracking data so that we can make evidence-based decisions to support our kids. But since they're not, I'm incredibly grateful to the Ontario Autism Coalition for stepping up and doing the work. The results paint a picture of an alarming picture of a system in crisis. Children with disabilities are not getting the safe, supported, meaningful education that they deserve, and far too many of them are getting no education at all. Since the Ford government was elected, they have taken more than $6 billion in funding out of our education system through repeated cuts. These cuts harm all of our children, but time and time again, it's the most vulnerable kids who pay the biggest price. 71 out of 72 school boards in the province are running a deficit in special education, spending more than what they're getting from the provincial government. For English public school boards alone, the gap is $580 million, and some estimates put the total gap for all school boards at $850 million. But even with boards spending hundreds of millions of dollars more than what they're getting from Doug Ford, half of parents of kids with a disability say their child is getting no meaningful education. 1/3 of families say their child's class or school placement is not appropriate to meet their child's needs. 1 in 4 children is not allowed to attend school full-time. When I asked the Minister of Education on Monday in committee about the tens of thousands of kids who want to be at school full-time but are not allowed to be, and the more than 20,000 kids who are not at school at all, his response was, "Don't worry, they'll be exempted from the new attendance requirement." But parents don't want their kids exempted. They want their kids to be at school like every other child. They want their children to receive the meaningful education that they have a right to under the Education Act in Ontario. When I asked the Minister of Education if he would commit to eliminating that $850 million shortfall in this year's core education funding, he would not do so. We're talking about statistics today, but these kids are not statistics. You've just heard about Amelia and Owen, and I just want to share briefly about Arizona, whom I met with this weekend along with her parents, Jen and Andrew. Arizona is 4, and she has autism, developmental delays, and a visual impairment. Because she didn't receive full-time support at school this year, Arizona's parents weren't able to work full-time, and because of the chain of dominoes that started, Arizona and her family are now living in a shelter. But when I met with them, Arizona's mom, Jen, was adamant. She doesn't want Arizona to have support at school so that they can get out of the shelter. She wants Arizona to have the support she needs at school because Arizona deserves the best possible education and the best possible life. All of these children deserve the best possible education. They deserve to be safe at school, to be supported and included. And so to Doug Ford and Paul Calandra, I just want to say, meet with these families personally. Sit down with them, interact with them, hear their stories, and then do the right thing and properly fund special education. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. Before we open up to questions, we feel it's important to highlight that both parents that are here today with us, as well as almost 70,000 other autistic children, are stuck on a wait list for core clinical services through the Ontario Autism Program. We can no longer ignore the fact that there is no such thing as early intervention in this province. These children would require much less support in schools if they were given the opportunity to access clinical therapies that would help them develop the skills to be successful in school. Instead, the challenges that these children are facing are being downloaded onto our education system. Most education workers will tell you that the complexity of needs they see in our schools right now are far greater than they were 5 or 6 years ago. It was in 2019 that this government blew up the Ontario Autism Program, then took years to create a new program. This caused the waitlist to continue to grow, and here we are at 70,000 students. The problem in our schools is going to continue to escalate until this government steps up and commits to supporting children with disabilities in a meaningful way. We have listed 11 detailed recommendations that can be found in our report, but it needs to be noted that families, education workers, and accessibility experts are delivering a consistent message. Current provincial policy and funding levels are not sufficient to provide safe, stable, and rights-based education to students with special education needs. The stories that these two parents shared here today are not one-offs. They are quite literally happening every day across this province. This government is ignoring disabled children, and it needs to stop now. And with that, we can open to questions.
I do have a bunch. For Shantel first, I know you talked a bit about what was going through your head during those 2 hours Amelia's missing. What's going through your head now that, I guess, presumably she's back at school in a fairly similar situation that she was that day?
Yes. So yesterday was her first day back to school. It went pretty well. We do have a safety plan in place, and I put some safeguards like a phone tracker and stuff like that in place so that I do know where she is. It hasn't lessened the anxiety. I still had a breakdown when I dropped her off at school, but I think with the help from the principal and the teachers, I think we're going to be able to keep her safe.
Did they give you any sort of explanation about how it happened?
She just walked right out.
Recess?
Yeah, it was during recess. She had went into the school. They thought that maybe she was going to the bathroom, and then she just walked out. Yeah.
I can't imagine. And I know Shannon talked about being on the OAP wait list. Where is Amelia at? Is she in service or waiting?
She's waiting. So we got her registered last year, so we still have a good 5-year, 6-year wait.
Have you accessed any of the pillars as the
We've done some group therapy, but it's mostly for the parents to learn how to deal with the children, but there hasn't really been anything available for Amelia as of right now. She's still on a wait list for like children's mental health. everything's wait lists.
All right, thank you. Remind me of Amelia's age.
She's 9.
9. Okay. And for Shannon, maybe just talk a little bit about your experience so far with the OAP. I don't think you mentioned when you were registered, how long you've been waiting so far?
Yeah, so we went on the wait list in June 2023. So we're a few years in, but still a wait ahead of us. And to go off the pillar autism supports, I find they're often Band-Aid solutions. Like we've accessed URS, urgent response, and that's great, but it doesn't help. Yeah.
12 weeks.
Yeah, it's 12 weeks of in-home support for an hour, but it's not helping our situation.
And if you're comfortable talking about this, I know Shantel mentioned some concurrent diagnoses that Amelia has. Is Owen dealing with autism or?
Yeah, he has complex special needs, so autism, anxiety, ADHD, intellectual disability, like a mood disorder. There's a whole slew of them, but he still has the right to a safe and meaningful education.
So it's, I guess, sort of the gold standard of what you're hoping for, a one-on-one EA support while he's in school?
Right now, it's his second day in his new specialized classroom placement, which is, I believe, 3 teachers, like EA's teacher. There's 7 other children in the class in Owen. So I'm hoping the smaller classroom environment, more supports. It's designed for him with van transportation because I used to be driving to and from on shortened days. So we have our fingers crossed. There's still a lot of anxiety after what we've been through.
Okay. And I know you mentioned you had to quit your job. Now that he's in this specialized class, are you able to work again?
Not right away because I'm worried about the instability. There's still a huge fear there. Yeah.
All right. And I just have one more question for Kate. I know you mentioned that there's a number of recommendations in the report. I guess, are there a couple top ones? Is one of them, just an influx of EAs in the
there's
system?
11 total recommendations. I won't list them all, but some of the main ones, obviously, funding is a big one. Funding should be based on student need rather than complicated formulas that don't make sense and actually work for the complexity of needs at any given school board. We would like IEPs to be mandated to be followed. We would like the AOTA recommendations to be put in our schools. Those are 3. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of. But yeah, no, you can read the rest of them in the report. These are things that they could do to get started. Oh, the big one, and this would be something that would be so easy to do, and we've frankly been asking for this for years, is data on exclusions and modified schedules. The government claims that they take data on this, but FOIs have shown over the years that it's not complete data. The data they do have seems to be more on hard exclusions, so students who've been, fully excluded for safety reasons, where paperwork might have been filed. But those soft exclusions and the modified schedules are the ones that are, the larger number that are happening daily. And, school boards are literally admitting that they don't track that. I mean, it's a call home to mom, sorry, you're going to have to come pick up little Sally. She's having a bad day. Nobody's tracking that. And believe it or not, there are parents who get called daily or multiple times a week to pick up their kid after only being there for an hour or 2. So, and then there's the modified schedules that end up being even organized. I mean, in Shannon's case, right, she was told that he was going to be on a modified schedule, but is that being tracked? Nowhere that we can see. And it's really frustrating that this government won't even take a look at the issue. If we're not tracking numbers on this, how can we acknowledge it's a problem? And I think that's probably what they're hoping for. But just simply tracking it would be a very good first step to acknowledging the problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.